To get this started, the Pioneer category, to get started, we have the speaker, Lenny Batycki.
I told my surgeon that I was going to take my PT time today by holding the microphone so I could talk to you without that dorky sling on after a shoulder replacement surgery last week. So awesome to see so many of you here. I'm going to try not to cry all the way through it because you all mean so much. But first off, I want to thank Alice Bixler, Norma, everybody that helped, Irma, and Brian Fell, and all the phone calls I got from Brian, and all the questions I still have that he didn't answer. Like, what am I going to say? What am I going to do? What am I going to be about? Also want to thank Rob Saladano with the camera in the air. Now wave at him, Rob. Rob, last week, the surgeon cleared me to come, and I'm like, well, I can't drive all that way. And I called Rob, who was part of the Place for Wheels. He was part of the Kendall BMX scene, really helping get it started. And Rob said, yes, right away. It was like, why didn't you call earlier? And he's taken care of me and driven me down here and stuff so that, my wife doesn't go crazy that I'm down here by myself with my arm like it is. But thanks to them for doing this. And for anybody that isn't in love with the chair's not comfortable enough, the food from the folks isn't this or that. How long have you done BMX? 50 some odd years and all. And in those years, did anybody else ever try to do this? No, you guys did. You guys cut the ground. You made this for us kids in those days, especially the Pioneer kids, who never dreamed that we could do this. I remember the MPSA banquet in '77, and we were in some barn building like this, and it was just like the biggest day of anything. And to have a Hall of Fame now after that, how cool. How cool you did that for us. And I remember her in her red, white, and blue Honda, Mickey, Marty Smith uniforms, and all those Haps Honda BAs that would come out there and whip us around the racetrack. They were always, you saw red, white, and blue, you probably weren't seeing checkers, because those guys were. So her teams were awesome, and the West Coast over here was no easy pickings for us, East Coast guys. Before I start talking about the Pioneer class, I want to give a little bit of an idea of what the 13-year-old Lenny Batycki saw in his early times at a BMX track, and what all of us pioneers saw. We didn't see electronic gates. We didn't see, internet. We saw wooden gates with a dad about right here holding a 2x4, probably had a heater going, had a brewski next to him, but he was trying, and we were already jumping the gate before he even had it pulled up, and trying to keep us from that. Our starting gates were about this high, especially at South Florida Cartway. It was about this high, and we made it through the first turn, and the berm at South Florida Cartway wasn't as high as these trophies. And we all had to go down there into corner number one, and guess what? We didn't all come out. And we push and shove our way, and then we had to go jump the Monza. The Monza was a paved corner of this go-kart track, South Florida Cartway, that banked itself up, looked like Bristol running tonight, and you had to go up and over it, and you'd take your life in your hands and go off into not a well-manicured area. Not a well-manicured area, not a well-cut bunch of grass. You went over a pavement and landed in grass, and then you had another turn with a berm about like this, and then you had a mud hole. And you could decide, see the slick kids, I would follow them around, and sure enough, guys like Seth Bucceri, Bill Prince, they weren't getting their bikes dirty. No, so I would watch, and there was this little corner right here that you could cheat and go back down the front straightaway and not have to go through the mud hole. Oh, I don't. I ain't that dumb. I'm going to follow them. So that's how you would do it. But the cool kids like TJ, he'd come across all kicked out and not even get muddy either. But I wasn't that good, so I followed those cats over that way. But those days, County Wheels, Bicycles Today. They were our internet. They were our social media. They were our Sports Illustrated. They were everything. To get a Tom Izor photo back in those days in one of those publications, I still got mine. They still mattered. And it wasn't just a post, it was maybe a defining moment. There are some photos that, man, I just remember the feelings that are in those pictures. And we tried to share some of them in what we did here, but there's countless ones that guys like Tom Izor, Bobby 5x5 Day, photographers that stood out there, and when kids went through the mud hole and didn't go this way and weren't timid and go that way, the mud splashed up on them and they had to ride back to wherever they were with their expensive camera with mud on it. But that was what Pioneer Days were like. And they were wild, they weren't pretty. We not only had wooden gates with dads up there at different times of the day having unique cadences, but we also had one-handed starts. I remember going to North Carolina and having to hold my hand up about here off the bars, because that way the guy in front of us who pointed at each one of us at the NBL National on a cut grass track at a parking lot in front of a BMX bike shop, once he got to 8, he would go like that. That didn't mean we could go. We had to wait till the guy behind us with a pop gun. Pop the pop gun. NBL War of the Stars National, 1978. Got second, still have the trophy. It meant that much. On a track that almost anybody in this room would go, ooh, man, you were the one having... There we go. I do that in live streams too, and the directors just kind of roll their eyes. But those were some of the pioneering days, and bike shop owners and track officials and sanctioned people, some of which I'll be speaking about, but guys like Tony the Peddler, Hialeah Speedway, another track, Hialeah Speedway BMX had a rubber band that you had to go. And that was really cool if you were over near where the rubber band was far away, but if it was tied here and gonna be coming back, well, those guys got to go first because you weren't getting stung. Because you was fixing to get stung if that rubber band hit you over there. So drawing better gate positions could mean a welt or a wealth of get out there and go fast. Dave from Wheeler Dealer, who helped BMX 84, Mike Eccarino from Mike's Cyclery, Art and Marie Beeler. And I talked to her earlier. You didn't go through Orlando unless you did two things. You had to pay the toll on the highway, and you had to go through a Beeler to get through there. Because they made BMX in Mickeytown what it was. They were the ones that kept the water on those tracks, kept them cut, kept the city off their backs, made sure that the gates were open when they should be, that the vandalism was taken care of before any of us ever knew that there was. Thank you. It was amazing. Dave and Irma and what they did here in Sarasota. I have my 1977 NPSA decal from the NPSA National that was here. What an amazing race to see that white track and going around. And I don't remember what the gate looked like back then. I usually back then just remember what it looked like with people going away from me. Dick Powell, BMX 84. We rode in luxury sometimes, 70s. There were 12 of us, 9 of us in the back of the Ford F-150 that went from South Florida all the way to Atlanta to get our butts beat at Power Strokers by the NBA guys that had came in from California that, oops, we didn't know. Mike Caron was so far in front of us by the time the gate actually hit the ground. Just amazing. But to see those days and just the Wild West that pioneering was back then, amazing. So we got a class and a quick class. It's the smallest one of it. Bill Green was the one that was going to speak, and I don't know why he's not here, because I wanted to hear Bill. that Kendall frontier, if you will, not only for South Florida BMXers, but really for the state itself, was opened up by what Bill and Rob and everybody that was down there did to give us what at that time was just a breakthrough track. We'd just gotten 𝘂𝙊𝙍𝙬 a year or two earlier, and that was a track that was pretty darn amazing. But when you had Kendall and all the things that went with it, and then Kendall hosted an ESPN race, they were doing big things down there, and we all benefited from it, whether we just went to show up and be moto filler or actually, did well there. That was a track that really changed a lot of what the sport, it lifted the sport for what it did. Bill Prince, I am as talented as any of us are here to rag on him usually for the many things that he likes to do, because it's a pretty easy target as the low bar. But without Bill Prince and without the work he did by himself for the most part, grinding out things that weren't always perfect, weren't always everything that you would want to be if you were a Hollywood producer, but it was a guy that was grinding it out in the pioneer days and taking the shots and the arrows, if you will, from pioneer stuff that mattered and built and never stopped and still doing it. And those cranky posts we all get to read on his Facebook isn't because he just wants to dog us about this or that. It's because his heart is still, 50 years later, really beating BMX. And one of the pioneers that we get to share with. Bill Madden. Gee whiz, Evel Knievel thinks you're crazy. How many surgeries have you had? I mean, my surgeon wants a picture with you. Amazing. The corner of Florida up there, Pensacola, Southern Alabama, whatever you want to call it, was owned and built, and the pioneer days in there, the trail, the first tire marks, those first knobbies were Bill's. And he never gave it up, and he taught and taught and taught and built in that area of Florida, or we wouldn't have had that area of Florida, because he's still grinding it out now. Don and Sarah Hutelin, amazing. Their kids are here, but I can tell you they're here. Their heart's here. Don's here in spirit, and the professionalism, the look that they brought, the lift that they did by supplying information to the newspapers, by supplying the ability to showcase Florida BMX to a world that thought everything was California. Well, they made sure that their kids and kids like me and Seth got a shot at least of looking professional enough to have the nation look at us and represent the FLA, because it was FLA back in those days, not just FL. Don and Sarah, amazing. The amount of things that they did, and the gift of their kids, and Bonnie still racing, really, really cool and special. Bryan Esser, George Esser, Mary Esser. George Esser, we don't have a mountain of any kind in Florida enough to have a Mount Rushmore, but him and Bob Krokker, who we'll be talking about, as far as sanctioned bosses and people that gave fire, took fire, pushed and built, George, along with Mary, because what George did to be Hollywood up front, to be the big guy, and the guy that was sitting there with the cigar and everything. Well, whatever George would cut a deal with, Mary had to come behind him and make sure that that worked. And to make sure that what he promised also included all the things that were right about what the deal needed to be. They were a phenomenal team. I had the blessing of working at the NBL headquarters in 79, 80, alongside of Bryan Esser. I got to sell ads in Bicycles Today, which was an interesting part of a career. But Bryan Esser, to sit next to him and watch his hand create different pieces of art and to lay out pictures and to use the gifts that he had, not only the talent he had on the track, but the artistic gifts and the personality that just beamed across wherever he was. It was so special. And Greg, of course, who spoke here last year, I didn't wear a t-shirt and shorts. See, look at, I could have, but not like Greg. You know, the poodle. But that family did a tremendous amount. Bob Krokker. When I said NPSA, Bob was over this, I can't remember what town he was from, but Dunedin. Raced there at Dunedin. Oh man. I had got to do the not quite balanced start, but we came back from California and I'm like, well, I can put my toe here and it's almost balanced start. And ended up second at some national over there. But the NPSA was a sanction that had structure so different than we knew from what we had on the NBL side. And it gave both a water level mark or a target to rise. And yeah, there was bickering back and forth and things like that. But you can't have a rivalry unless you have a rival that is reasonably equal to you. And both NBL, NPSA, and it was NML when I signed my first license, by the way, National Motorcycle League. That competition might not have been pretty all the time, but both drove BMX to places that the other couldn't have done by themselves. So Bob Krokker was a guy that helped build, and all the ones that I've spoke to, helped build where we are today. And the last person I'm going to speak about is a guy that, I don't know, 4 years I probably traveled up and down the roads with. He was the best man at my first wedding. I wouldn't let him be best man at the second wedding because the first one didn't work out. But he was the NPSA national #1. And he was that adversary that in those days, Greg Esser, Brian Webb, Randy Street, Roland Vike needed from that other sanction. He was the guy that was the flag bearer that, you know, they had to go through if, you know, they were going to win. And NPSA was thought of as the little guy, but when Seth lined up on the gate, they had to respect him because Seth was a guy that could pedal right along with him and beat him and do things that brought light to NPSA's side. So it was the competition, the grit, definitely not pretty, but the pioneers that I get to be a part of the inductee with, so proud. Thank you very much from all of us in the pioneer category. It's been great to watch the better things that all of you that past our time have made BMX. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much, Lenny. If I could ask all the Pioneer inductees to come on up. Stage right. Lenny, don't run too far away. Understood. Well, we discussed that about lining up alphabetically, but BMXers tend to do things their own way, so we figured they wouldn't pay attention. First up, actually, was Lenny. On the X. You know, Lenny, usually it's the shake hands and hold the award, but we did good. Hop on down and get your picture taken with Alice. Seth's coming. Wants to make an appearance, you know, make an entrance, that's all right. Seth Bucceri, come on up. On the X. Congratulations, Seth Bucceri. Oh, you gotta hop down and get your picture taken with Alice. That's, oh, yeah. You gotta, I mean, picture taken with me is no big deal, but Alice, that's the... Do we have a representative for Essers? Great, come on up, please. For Bryan Esser, George, and Mary Esser. Take it after, okay? Bill Green. No, nobody for Bill. Don and Sarah Hutelin. Congratulations. Congratulations, thank you. Representative for Bob Krokker. Okay. All right, Bill Madden. Congratulations. Woo! And Bill Prince. Congratulations.